French President Emmanuel Macron begins a three-day state visit to Morocco this Monday, a sign of rapprochement after years of tensions between the two countries. Macron will even be welcomed on the tarmac by King Mohammed VI, a rare honour. Much of the strain derives from France's ambiguous stance on the disputed Western Sahara and Macron's quest for closer ties with Algeria. The Western Sahara is a Spanish colony largely controlled by Morocco, but claimed by the Algeria-backed Polisario Front. Let's get some more analysis on this then. We can bring in Paul Melly, who's a consulting fellow on the Africa program at Chatham House. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24. Does Macron's stance on the Western Sahara constitute a breakthrough in bilateral relations?
I think it really does. There have been a lot of other irritants in Moroccan-French relations over the last 2 or 3 years. For example, rows over visas, rows over Morocco's readiness to accept people whose immigration status was rejected by France, accusations about claims that Morocco might have had a connection to do with bugging, intelligence bugging of senior French figures, those sorts of things. But the real big issue is the Western Sahara, which of course is a territory that was originally, as you mentioned, a Spanish colony until the mid-1970s after the death of General Franco, when Spain became a democracy. And the Western Sahara, before its status could be finally decided at an international level, was taken over, occupied by Morocco, and then a guerrilla movement, the Polisario, emerged, fighting for Western Sahara independence. And for the conflict has really been deadlocked since then, with Morocco occupying most of Western Sahara and a very large number of Moroccans coming to settle in the territory, quite a lot of investment and development. But Polisario still active in parts of the territory beyond a defensive sand wall that the Moroccan military built. And crucially, with Polisario, the independence fighters, backed by Algeria. So around Tindouf in the west, far west of the Algerian Sahara, that's really where Polisario is now headquartered. So there's been over decades this complete deadlock, and it's become very linked to the many difficulties in relations between Algeria and Morocco. But in late July, France actually shifted its position and officially for the first time said that it felt that the future of the Western Sahara had to lie within an autonomy plan the Moroccans had drawn up.
And what does that mean for Algeria-French relations then?
Well, it's very difficult because President Macron has also made a big effort over recent years to try and improve relations with Algeria. The independence war in the 1950s, when Algerians fought for independence from France, was particularly brutal and bloody on both sides. It was a devastating conflict which left scars in the relationship for decades. And Macron's gone out of his way to try and repair that relationship and recognize the difficult past. For example, a very prominent French historian was appointed to write a report really looking at, if you like, at the harsh truths about that conflict and implicitly some of the terrible things that were done by French forces during the course of that conflict. And he has worked hard to build up a much more cooperative approach with the Algerians. But then with this decision now to accept the Moroccan stance, or not completely accept it, but come very close to the Moroccan stance on the Western Sahara, that has brought a halt to the rapprochement that was underway with Algeria. And of course, this is a difficult issue for many countries. France isn't the only country to shift its stance. Spain, notably, which also has a colonial connection with Morocco from past history, also recently shifted ground. But for the French, because France was the colonial power in Algeria and the main colonial power in Morocco over so many years, and there are such deep social and political and economic ties between France and the Maghreb countries, that has a particular sensitivity.
And Morocco also has friendly relations with military regimes in the Sahel. Could this rapprochement with Morocco and France mean that it could ease France's troubles with countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, or Mali?
It might. It's obviously not the main factor in the visit, which is really about bilateral relations and the huge economic potential. For example, a huge number of French business people are accompanying Macron on this trip, and French companies hope for some big contracts. But Morocco has been unusual in reaching out to these three military regimes in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso at a time when they've been under pressure from ECOWAS, the West African bloc, that's to say the countries along the coast of West Africa, and Morocco has reached out and offered to the Sahel regimes an alternative trade route, an alternative trade gateway. Now, making that practical would be very difficult because it would mean developing trade routes across the Sahara, where security conditions are very difficult with jihadist armed groups very active. But symbolically, it was significant. And so with the rapprochement in relations between France and Morocco, that in the background might help to shift the ground a bit. In talking with some Sahelian officials over recent months, they've been saying, oh, well, the pressure will be a bit easier now because Morocco has reached out to us and offered us this alternative trade gateway that avoids the West African coastal countries. Well, that was always more of a gesture than a hard economic reality. But all the same, the fact that France and Morocco are now shifting onto more common ground will help possibly ease France's relationships in that really very difficult Sahelian crisis.
And tell us then, it's worth noting, I mean, Macron's not going alone, he's going with a delegation, and as you mentioned, there's a focus on business deals for this visit. Can you just tell us about that?
Yes, well, although Western Sahara has a very small population, it has really important phosphate reserves. And of course, it is, as the name suggests, it's in the Sahara Desert, so very high level of sunshine, and it's coastal. It's a strip along the coast of the west of the African continent between Morocco and Mauritania. And so there's great potential for solar power and wind power, and French companies are very interested in that within Western Sahara itself. And then in Morocco, of course, Morocco is a large economy. It already has significant, it's already very developed in sectors like banking and even, for example, aerospace. There's a very modern car factory, so with French investment outside Tangier already, and other French companies now, groups such as Airbus, for example, Total, the energy company, the French companies that are very active in construction of railway trains, they all have aspirations and hopes for big contracts. And it's going to be, in that sense, quite a significant economic breakthrough. And the symbolism of being welcoming Macron at the airport after those earlier difficult issues around visas and intelligence and so on over the last couple of years will be really important. But it still poses regional questions because Algeria remains there, of course, strongly supporting Polisario. Polisario remains active, even though there hasn't really been fighting in the last several years. And of course, this also matters for Mauritania, which is another key partner of France and which lies to the south of Western Sahara.
Paul Melly, I'm going to have to cut you off there. I'm very sorry. That's all we have time for. But thank you very much for your analysis. That's Paul Melly from Chatham House's Africa programme.